Welcome to the VHF UHF channel, and this is a quick video to talk about solar activity and the effect on the above 30 megahertz range that you should understand. This is tip number 25 for today, March the 28th, 2019. Okay, we talk a lot about solar indices for shortwave because it has a direct impact on shortwave radio signals. But the solar activity also has an impact on VHF ranges, and there's different types of impact. So if, for example, here we see SFI, this number is important if you're listening to the low band of the VHF spectrum, say 30 to 54 megahertz. Solar flux goes from 60 to 400, and when it gets really high, what is interesting is that 30 to 54 megahertz in the low VHF range might suddenly become a little bit like shortwave, start propagating signals from far away. For example, in the high phase of a solar activity, when the solar flux, I've seen the solar flux go as high as 353. Well, when you get these numbers, you can bet you that the 6 meter band, 50 megahertz, is probably propagating like shortwave every day when the sun rises. And 30 to 50 megahertz, well, you'll hear faraway stations. So this is something to look at. This is something to understand. So take a look at the solar indices from time to time, because you never know what could happen. Another number that's interesting for the VHF range, and this one will impact higher frequencies. It will impact the 2 meter band, for example, and maybe even impact the 70 centimeter band for like 400 megahertz. And it's what we call the Aurora scatter, or the effects of a very strong geomagnetic storm. So the K index will give you the status of what's happening in the geomagnetic field of the Earth. Usually, what would be interesting and what could be very interesting to observe is when the K index, the higher it is, the more unsettled, and even to minor storm or major storm. It goes from 0 to 9, 9 meaning major geomagnetic storm happening. A K of 9, go outside and look at night because you might see auroras, for example. When the K index goes above 5 or above, it's in geomagnetic storming. And you know what? There are some effects on VHF and UHF propagation. Sometimes the geomagnetic storms will actually induce new ways of propagation and have, for example, auroral scatter, where you can actually maybe even bounce signals from the VHF range, like 2 meter band, off of the ionosphere due to the weird interaction with the auroral activity and the geomagnetic storming and the Earth's own ionosphere. And this is very interesting. And typically signals that will actually bounce off of this phenomena have a flutter, a very weird flutter in them that sounds almost ghostly. But when the K index rises at 5 and above, take a listen to the VHF range and even UHF range. You might be surprised at weird signals appearing suddenly and happening. And, it's always kind of interesting. So even if the propagation effects of solar flux and the magnetic field are not as present in the VHF UHF range, it doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means it's very surprising, sometimes weird phenomena of propagation due to solar flux or solar activity and the geomagnetic storms that we have around the Earth. So you can actually look at these numbers here, and I'll post a link to this website in the description below the video. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, let us know, and hope you enjoyed these daily tips.